Hey everyone, so I'm sure everybody has had time to play Vesper's Host at this point. Pretty cool dungeon in my opinion, but I'm here to talk about the weapons and how they will change the endgame meta going forward. So I wanted to make this video like right after I started finding out the perks on the weapons, and then I realized they're not in the API, so they're kind of like classified right now technically. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll wait for them to be declassified, but it's been a long time now. It's been like 3 or 4 days now, and they're still not in the API. And I think everybody has played the game now and knows what perks these weapons have, but in case you don't know, this video will go over them. So, if you haven't played the dungeon yet, you're like, ooh, I want to know, by surprise what the perks are, don't watch this video. Anyways, let's talk about the new weapons. There are 4 of them, 5 if you include Icebreaker, and I'm going to talk about where I've placed all of them in my endgame weapon tier list. So, number 1, we have the new Area Denial. It's called VS Velocity Baton. So this is a new Void Area Denial GL. It has the Bray Legacy Origin trait, which is kind of like a version of like Wellspring / Bray Inheritance kind of thing, where like when you do damage to targets, it gives you ability regen to your ability that is closest to a full charge. So kind of unique in that way, maybe good for some sort of like grenade spam builds or something like that, or multi-charge abilities. I'm not sure how it interacts with that. Could be potentially interesting, and we know Bray Inheritance is pretty decent, but enough about the origin trait. It's on all 4 of these weapons. Let's talk about the actual weapon itself in question. Now, this thing answers a long question that we've all had, and that's we've had attrition orbs on weapons like Undercurrent before. It has been pretty bad, to say the least, but now we have it on a GL which is tick based, right, which is like a Wither Horde, and people tried it, and apparently you can get like 3 orbs per shot off this thing, which is absolutely insane. So even if they patch this or they make it a lot worse, maybe it's 1 orb per shot or something like that, I think Bungie knew what they were doing with this one. This thing doesn't get autoloading. If it got autoloading, that would be phenomenal. It would be absolutely excellent for stuff like solo rotations, but it still gets stuff like Demolitionist instead of autoloading, which is, it's okay, it's decent, good stand-in. And it also has Repulsor and Destabilizing in case you want to use it for some sort of neutral gameplay with some sort of Void 3.0 or Prismatic, Jur Falcons related build. So that's all I have to say about Velocity Baton. I placed it at rank 1 on the tier list here, and that's because, being able to spam like 3 orbs per GL shot is just kind of insane. As much as you can talk about the utility of a lost signal giving you darkness transcendence energy or like the movement potential of a mountaintop, I don't think there's anything as kind of meta changing as this, right? Attrition orbs until now has kind of been a perk where you can use it to make orbs in a pinch, and it's like a utility perk, but it feels kind of like shoot salute in the way that it's very specific in its use cases. This is so easy to use on such a wide scale in the game that I kind of have to agree that like attrition orbs is just insanely meta defining on this weapon. So I decided to place it at rank 1. I mean, special GLs right now are not like the most insane they've ever been, but I do think this is deserving of an S tier placement and rank 1 as well. Next up, we have a heavy GL. This is the one that everyone's been talking about. I'm kind of going out of order here, sorry. But next up, we have a heavy GL, and that is VS Chill Inhibitor. Now, this weapon, kind of called it, right, guys? When I made my dungeon prep video, I was saying like, I see in the API and I see in these leaks that a heavy GL is going to drop from the dungeon. Knowing Bungie, they're not going to make another adaptive heavy GL after already releasing Wicked Sister and Bittersweet. So it's probably going to be a rapid fire heavy GL, and it's probably going to be really good. Bungie makes at least one weapon from all their dungeons really, really meta defining in the endgame PvE space, and this is it, ladies and gentlemen. This is the best heavy GL we've ever seen in this game by a long shot. Number 1, as you guys have heard me say, rapid fire heavy GLs have the highest DPS and higher reserves as in total damage than adaptive frames right now. On top of this thing has Envious Arsenal, not Envious Assassin, Envious Arsenal, Cascade Point, Attrition Orbs, which has potential synergy if you use it in a team setting with Explosive Light. You have Bait and Switch, Explosive Light, Surrounded, and it has Bray Legacy, and with Spike, it gets 8 in the mag. I know that for a fact because I had one drop on day 1. So this thing is nuts. It is easily the best heavy GL in the game. In fact, it is so good. It is so good. Remember Bittersweet, Wicked Sister, and Edge Transit used to be an S tier? I made a new tier. I made S tier be where VS Chill Inhibitor goes because it is really a step up over all of the weapons below it. There's no question about it, no question. And then so I shifted everything else down. I made some adjustments to the heavy GL tier list. I added an F tier. It usually just go down to D. A lot of the tier lists go down to F, so I made it go down to F, segmented a little bit better. So you can see here there's a bunch of changes to heavy GLs, right? There's a new E tier, a new F tier. I think Hullabaloo, Swarm, and Typhon were overrated last patch, so I dropped them 2 tiers instead of 1, and everything else here is just tier shift thanks to our new friend VS Chill Inhibitor. So I'll be adding this and making damage rotations to the DPS spreadsheet. I've already added some stuff here, like in the swap tab, for example. I believe you can see here rapid fire grenade launcher, cascade point plus enhanced surrounded vs chill inhibitor. You can see it's the highest swap DPS of any legendary heavy weapon in the game right now, including rockets, which is pretty crazy. So that's heavy gels out of the way. I'm sure you guys probably expected me to give this thing praise, but yeah, it is really good. Farm that first encounter, get your drops. This thing is crazy. Okay, anyways, next up we have the new fusion rifle, which is VS Gravitic Arrest. This thing is, it's probably the least interesting weapon from the dungeon. It is an adaptive fusion rifle that's void, I believe, and I've placed it in the B tier, right? And the reason for that is because this thing, if we didn't know about Glacioclasm coming out pretty soon, this thing we would say it's pretty good because it's the first fusion rifle with Withering Gaze. Now, in my opinion, I do think the sniper rifles are probably better users of Withering Gaze than the fusion rifles. They have longer range, more universal, better ammo economy, blah, 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 hit scan, single target, whatever. But I will say, the big thing about VS Gravitic Arrest is it's missing a lot of other perks. Like, you don't have autoloading, you don't have reconstruction, you don't have rewind, you don't have envious, you don't have envious arsenal, you don't have any of that stuff, right? So you're just kind of left with demolitionist and Withering Gaze, and thankfully Withering Gaze is not a perk that requires your mag to be full, otherwise this thing would be really bad. But because it does have weaken on a fusion, I think it's more useful than something like a demo chill clip deliverance. I think obviously slow is a worse effect than weaken in the grand scheme of things. So I did decide to place it in the B tier, but if I'm gonna put Glacioclasm in the A tier with the potential for that Withering Gaze charge time thing to be worth using, then you know, it doesn't make sense to have VS Gravitic Arrest any higher than it is right now. So it's gonna go in the B tier. I think it is less usable than most of the perks in the fusions in the A tier. So yeah, it's gonna go in the B tier and it's gonna be placed right there. And finally, the last legendary weapon I wanted to talk about from Vesper's host is, of course, VS Pyroelectric Propellant. It's a 600 RPM arc auto rifle. It features eddy current and jolting feedback as well. Now, this roll did not manage to knock out our main two options here, which are No Hesitation and the Summoner. That's for a variety of reasons, but I did put it in the notes here. So it's, you know, it's a good alternative. It's an option like Repulsor Destabilizing and Riposte. We have Destabilizing One for All Reckless Oracle, and we have Eddy Current Jolting Feedback VS Pyroelectric that's been added here. So it's certainly not a bad choice or anything like that. I just think it's not as game defining as something like a No Hesitation or even something like the Summoner. So finally, we have Icebreaker. Now, those of you who pay attention to my boss damage spreadsheet have probably already seen me add Icebreaker here. Now, for reference, I'll give you some numbers here just so you kind of understand what we're dealing with. Icebreaker is a new archetype of sniper. It is a 49 RPM, which is the slowest firing sniper rifle in the game, and its damage per shot is approximately something like a Prospector shot. Now, you have to be aware that this sounds like a lot of damage, right? Prospector shots do a lot of damage, and this is a special weapon we're talking about, but this thing's fires so slowly that if we actually go ahead and look at the sustain tab here and we look for Icebreaker, you'll see that the DPS is something like 110,000 with a total damage number of 1.2 million. This is really bad. So I would not recommend using this thing for boss damage whatsoever. It is absolutely horrible unless there's some sort of interaction that I'm not aware of. Even the Shatter Ignite thing, which is obviously rate limited to how often you can freeze a target and how often you can ignite a target, is really not worth using. Now, in terms of this thing's endgame viability when it comes to roam content, I can definitely see people using this thing with exotics like Rhymecone Raymond, but I don't know. I really don't think it's good for boss damage, certainly not. And in terms of being usable for like roam gameplay, I can see it being, you know, beneficial in some like slower playstyles where you sit back and you freeze enemies and you just kind of quickly snipe them to get that freeze ignition off and you get your ammo back. I can certainly see it being useful for that. Certainly a buff to stasis builds indirectly, but generally speaking, I don't think this is going to affect endgame content at the highest level to a great degree. Just an interesting exotic, certainly, and the catalyst is pretty nice as well. Okay. Finally, some bonus goodies for you guys. I wanted to talk about the actual dungeon bosses since a lot of people have been asking me questions about them. I did boss health measurement on both bosses and I found a couple things. So first of all, Ranix has almost 12 million health. Okay, so that might not seem like a lot compared to some of the recent bosses we've had like Locus and Heffend, but this boss actually has a different scaler. It has damage resist compared to other bosses. So you do around, I think it's 2.03 times less damage to this boss numerically compared to other bosses, which means effectively in game, it has a health value of 24 million. Now that's a lot, right? 24 million is up there with like Witness, Crota, you know, War Priest, you know, big chunky bosses like that. And it's a 3-man boss with a 15-second phase. So how do you kind of deal with that? Well, obviously with the servitors, I think there's like 9 of them. So you can theoretically do, you know, 9 times the damage compared to if you were just damaging 1, which is why a lot of people are using stuff like Glacial Quake, you know, heavy wave frames, Parasite, Thunder Crash, Nova, whatever, what have you. So that's all you need to know. That's pretty much it. There was a myth on day 1 that I thought was possibly true but didn't really test, that the servitors that have the orange eyes, like the ones that are active and giving you numbers, those ones take more damage, and so if you targeted those ones, you would do more damage to the boss. I tested this yesterday. It's not true. You do the same amount of damage to the health bar and to the wipe screen and visually on your screen, no matter what servitor you attack. So it's really just about how many servitors you attack. And the reason why your damage slows down so much towards the end, by the way, is because when you're left with those lingering 1 or 2 servitors, you can no longer do 9 times damage to the boss because there's only 2 servitors left, right? So you're left doing like, you know, just normal damage to the boss, and so the health bar moves a lot slower. And I believe, you know, once you've killed like a certain number of servitors, the boss enters like a final stand mode. Not that that's threatening or anything, but it kind of just lets you clean up the remaining servitors, because the game probably, you know, Bungie probably knows that, you know, it's going to take you a little while because they're stragglers, right? You're going to kill the boss. So that's pretty much it for Ranix. Next up, we have the Corrupted Puppeteer. So the Puppeteer has around 16.3 million health measured with Xeno. Doesn't have any weird crit scaler as far as I'm aware. I do know though that I've received a lot of reports from people saying that the wipe screen numbers after you kill the boss are super variable depending on what weapon you use. I know Xeno is pretty consistent when it comes to wipe screen stuff on bosses. I know a lot of people who use very typical weapons that don't chunk the health bar like heavy jails have reported similar total numbers on the wipe screen as well, or on the completion screen, I should say. So that's pretty much all I have to say about the new dungeon, Vesper's Host. I've added all the new weapons. I'm going to be doing some damage testing and making new rotations with the new heavy jail in the near future. Expect to see like the sustain tab fill up with stuff like you know, VS Chill inhibitor pretty soon. And yeah, I'm excited for the future of damage testing with this new heavy GL. Pretty excited for that. Instead of Horseman Impetus Edge, we'll have Horseman Impetus Inhibitor. So get excited for that. Anyways, that's all I have to say for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this little breakdown of the new weapons. And yeah, I'll see you when we start doing damage testing.